Scott Kincaid stood at his kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the black SUV pull into his driveway. The engine cut off with a sharp click that carried through the morning air. Something felt wrong immediately. Veronica was 3 hours early, and she never showed up anywhere without calling first. She stepped out, her movements quick and precise. Even from 50 feet away, he could see the tension in her shoulders. Her usual perfect posture looked forced, like she was holding herself together through sheer will. In 12 years as a trauma nurse, Scott had learned to read body language the way other people read books. Stress, pain, deception, they all left physical signatures. Veronica wore all three like a uniform. She opened the rear door, and Holly emerged, dragging a suitcase that looked too big for her small frame. Scott frowned. His 6-year-old niece usually carried a backpack for weekend visits. This looked like she was moving in. The front door chimed. Scott opened it before Veronica could knock twice. Scott. Veronica's smile looked painted on. Thank you for taking her on such short notice. Holly stood behind her mother, quiet. Too quiet. The kid who usually ran to him for hugs, chattering about school and friends and whatever cartoon she'd watched that morning, now stared at the ground like she was afraid to make eye contact. Her small hands clutched the straps of a backpack that looked stuffed to capacity. What's the emergency? Scott asked, his nurse instincts kicking in. When people showed up unannounced with overpacked bags and nervous children, there was usually more to the story. Strategy offsite in Seattle. 3 days. The firm is flying us out tonight. Veronica lifted another bag from the SUV, a large duffel that looked heavy enough to hold a week's worth of clothes. I know it's sudden, but I have no choice. You know how these corporate things work. Scott didn't know, actually. Veronica worked for a small marketing firm that handled local restaurants and retail shops. The kind of operation that held meetings at coffee shops, not luxury retreats in Seattle. Scott studied her face, looking for tells. In Afghanistan, reading people correctly meant the difference between walking into an ambush and going home alive. In the ER, it meant catching the patients who lied about their symptoms until their conditions became critical. Veronica wore the same expression as those patients' eyes darting away, mouth tight with suppressed tension, hands moving just a little too much. Since when do marketing consultants have emergency offsites? He pressed. Since they pay 6 figures and I can't afford to say no. She set the bag down hard enough to make a sound on his concrete steps. Look, I don't want to burden you, but Holly can't miss school and the babysitter is sick with some kind of stomach bug. Holly tugged Scott's shirt with the urgency of a child who had something important to say, but couldn't say it in front of adults. He knelt down to her level, bringing his face close to hers. This was when kids usually whispered secrets or asked for snacks or complained about bedtimes. Hey, kiddo, you okay with staying here for a few days? Holly nodded, but her eyes said something completely different. Something that made Scott's chest tighten with the same feeling he'd gotten in combat zones when the silence lasted too long. When everything seemed normal, but your instincts screamed that danger was coming. Veronica checked her phone. I really need to go. Flight's at 7. You packed enough for a month. Scott lifted one of Holly's bags. Heavy. What's in here? Just clothes. You know how kids are. Veronica backed toward her car. I'll call tonight when I land. She drove off without hugging Holly goodbye. Scott watched the SUV disappear around the corner. Something was wrong. Veronica never avoided eye contact this much. Never rushed conversations. Never left without detailed instructions about Holly's routine. Uncle Scott. Holly's voice was barely a whisper. He turned to her. She looked smaller than usual, like she was trying to disappear into her jacket. What is it, honey? Holly glanced around the front yard, checking corners, checking the street, checking windows like she was searching for threats. Then she stepped closer and whispered words that changed everything. Words that hit Scott like shrapnel from an IED. We need to leave. Now. The way she said it, not like a scared child, but like a soldier giving intel, made every alarm bell in Scott's head start ringing. In the Marines, when someone said leave now, we didn't ask questions. You grabbed your gear and moved. In the ER, when a patient's eyes said, help me, you dropped everything else and acted. Holly's eyes said both. Scott's training kicked in automatically. 12 years in the Marines had drilled certain responses into his nervous system. When someone you trusted said, "Leave now," you didn't debate or ask for explanations. You acknowledged the threat and took action. In Afghanistan, hesitation got people killed. In emergency medicine, delays cost lives. Holly wasn't a fellow Marine or a trauma patient, but her voice carried the same urgent authority. Something had put fear into this child, the kind of deep, bone-level fear that made smart people run. Okay, Scott kept his voice calm and steady, the way he'd learned to do when talking to patients who were bleeding out but still conscious. "Let's get some ice cream. Would you like that?" Holly nodded quickly, relief flooding her small face. She trusted him to hear what she wasn't saying out loud. Scott grabbed his keys and wallet from the kitchen counter. "Just need to get your bags from the car. Leave them." Holly's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength for a 6-year-old. Her fingers felt cold against his skin. "Please, leave them." The desperation in her voice made his decision. Whatever was in those bags, whatever Veronica had planned, Holly was more afraid of it than she was of leaving her belongings behind. "All right, just ice cream then." They walked to his truck, Scott's eyes automatically scanning for potential threats. The blue sedan across the street hadn't been there when Veronica arrived. Tinted windows made it impossible to see inside, but he could detect the faint heat shimmer from the exhaust pipe. Engine running, driver waiting, Scott lifted Holly into the passenger seat and buckled her in with deliberate calm. Normal routine. Nothing urgent. But his peripheral vision tracked the sedan while his hands went through the familiar motions of starting the truck and adjusting mirrors. "Holly, can you reach in your jacket pocket? Check if you have anything in there that isn't yours." She dug around and pulled out a phone. Black, rectangular, definitely not the pink flip phone with cartoon stickers that Aaron had bought her for emergencies. "That's not yours, is it?" "No." Holly stared at the device like it might bite her. "Mom put it there this morning. She said it was so she could find me if I got lost." Scott's blood went cold. He pulled into a gas station 3 blocks away and parked behind the building, out of sight from the street. The sedan followed them halfway, then continued driving past when Scott turned into the lot. He took the phone from Holly and examined it carefully. The screen showed multiple apps running in the background. Location tracker displaying their exact coordinates. Audio recorder with a timestamp showing it had been active for 6 hours. Something called Family Finder with a detailed map marking their current position with a red dot. Someone wasn't just watching them, someone was tracking their every movement and potentially listening to their conversations. "Holly, I need you to listen carefully. Someone is watching us through this phone. I'm going to turn it off, and we're going to take a different car. Can you be brave for me?" "Yes." Scott powered down the phone and removed the battery. He called his neighbor, Darla, from his own phone. "Darla, it's Scott. I need to borrow your car for a few hours." "Emergency." "Of course, dear. Keys are under the garden gnome." 10 minutes later, Scott and Holly sat in Darla's old Honda, driving toward the other side of town. No one followed them. The Pineview Motel sat on a quiet street lined with tall fir trees that blocked most of the afternoon light. Scott had chosen it specifically for the isolation, no busy highways, no chain restaurants, no security cameras that might record their movements. The kind of place that rented rooms by the week to construction workers and long-haul truckers who paid cash and didn't ask questions. Scott paid for 2 nights up front and carried Holly to room 15. The space was clean but basic: 2 double beds with faded floral bedspreads, a small table with mismatched chairs, a bathroom that smelled faintly of industrial disinfectant. Better than home right now. Safer than home. Holly sat on the bed closest to the door, swinging her legs and looking around with the adaptability that kids possessed. She hadn't complained once about leaving her toys behind or asked when they were going home. That worried Scott more than if she'd been crying. "You hungry?" he asked. "A little." They walked 3 blocks to a diner called Murphy's. Red vinyl booze worn smooth by decades of customers. Country music playing from speakers that probably hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. The kind of place where nobody looked twice at a man and a young girl eating dinner together, where the waitress called everyone Han and minded her own business. Scott ordered burgers and fries for both of them. Holly picked at her food with the mechanical precision of someone who was eating because they had to, not because they wanted to. Her usual chatter about school friends and favorite TV shows was completely absent. "Can you tell me what happened at home?" he asked. Holly looked around the diner. Two truckers at the counter. An old woman reading a newspaper. No one close enough to hear. "Daddy didn't fall into the lake." She whispered that Scott's blood went cold. Aaron had drowned 3 months ago. "Accidental death," the coroner said. "Slipped on wet rocks while fishing." "What do you mean?" "He was awake when Mom pushed him. He tried to swim, but she held his head down." Holly's voice stayed flat, like she was reading from a textbook. "Mom yelled that he should have signed something. Then he didn't talk anymore." Scott's hands clenched under the table. Aaron was a strong swimmer. Had been since they were kids. "Holly, are you sure about what you saw?" "I don't lie, Uncle Scott. You know that." True. Holly had never told a lie in her 6 years. Not even small ones. "Where were you when this happened?" "Behind the big tree by the water. Mom thought I was napping in the car." Holly took a small bite of her burger. She made the 911 call later. Much later. Scott's mind raced. If Holly was right, then Aaron's death wasn't an accident. It was murder. And Veronica was planning something that required Holly out of the picture. They finished eating and returned to the motel. Holly fell asleep watching cartoons while Scott opened his laptop. Aaron had been paranoid about digital security, a trait that had annoyed Veronica, but proved useful now. He'd learned encryption and data protection during his 15 years working in tech support, always claiming that hackers and identity thieves were everywhere. He kept everything password protected, backed up in multiple locations, organized with the same meticulous attention he'd brought to his tackle box and fishing gear. But Scott knew his brother's security system better than anyone. Aaron used the same pattern since their college days, combinations of their childhood dog's name, Ranger, their Marine unit designation, 2nd Battalion, and significant dates from their family history. Scott had teased him about it for years, saying it wasn't as secure as Aaron thought. Tonight, that predictability was a gift. Scott logged into Aaron's cloud storage using Ranger 2 in D Battalion, 1985, the year Aaron enlisted. Hundreds of files filled the directory structure. Financial records dating back 10 years. Work documents from various tech companies. Personal photos from fishing trips and family gatherings. And a folder marked Personal Legal that Aaron had created just 4 months before his death. Inside that folder, Scott found what he was looking for, a subfolder labeled Insurance Matters. The life insurance application from Mutual Benefit Company was comprehensive, 12 pages detailing coverage amounts, beneficiary designations, medical history requirements. $2 million in coverage. Primary beneficiary, Holly Kincaid, age 6. Secondary beneficiary and legal guardian, Veronica Kincaid. Scott scrolled through every page carefully, reading the fine print with the attention to detail his medical training had drilled into him. Everything was filled out completely, professionally, exactly the way Aaron approached every important document in his life. Everything except the signature page. Aaron's name was typed to the bottom, but the actual signature line remained blank. Scott scrolled through the document properties. Last modified, 2 days before Aaron died. His phone buzzed. Text from Veronica. "How's Holly? Everything okay?" Scott typed back, "Fine. Sleeping." But everything wasn't fine. If Holly was right, Veronica had killed Aaron for insurance policy he never signed. And now she needed legal custody of Holly to file a fraudulent claim. Scott closed the laptop and checked the door locks. Tomorrow he would start building a case. Tonight, he would keep Holly safe outside. A car drove past slowly. Scott watched through the curtains until its taillights disappeared into the darkness. Scott woke at dawn. Military habit. Holly still slept, curled under the motel's thin blanket like a small animal seeking warmth. He made coffee from the room's machine and planned his day. First step, confirm Holly's story. If Aaron was murdered, the evidence would be in the autopsy report. Dr. Martinez had performed Aaron's autopsy. Scott knew him from the hospital. They'd worked together on trauma cases. Martinez was thorough, careful, honest. Scott called the county coroner's office. "Dr. Martinez? This is Scott Kincaid. I'd like to discuss my brother's autopsy." "Scott, I'm sorry for your loss. What can I help you with?" "Professional curiosity. I've been reviewing the circumstances, and some details don't add up. Can you come in this afternoon? I have time around 2. Holly woke while Scott finished the call. She sat up slowly, looking around the unfamiliar room. Where are we? Safe place. We're going to visit someone who can help us. They had breakfast at a different diner. Then Scott bought Holly coloring books and crayons at a drugstore. The county building had a children's area where she could wait that doctor. Martinez met them in his office at the county morgue, a sterile space that smelled of disinfectant and coffee. A tall man with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He'd worked as a medical examiner for 23 years and had the careful, methodical manner of someone who'd seen too much death to take any of it lightly. Holly, right? I remember your dad bringing you to the hospital picnic last year. He was proud of you. Martinez's voice carried genuine warmth when he spoke to the child. Holly nodded politely but stayed close to Scott, her small hand gripping his shirt. What specific questions do you have about Aaron's case? Martinez asked, pulling up files on his computer. The drowning. Walk me through what you found during the examination. Scott settled into the chair across from Martinez's desk, keeping one hand on Holly's shoulder. Martinez's expression grew troubled as he scrolled through the digital records. Honestly, Scott, some aspects of your brother's case bothered me from the beginning. Professional instincts, you understand. When something doesn't fit the expected pattern, it raises questions. What kind of questions? Your brother had significant bruising on his neck and throat area. The pattern and location weren't consistent with hitting rocks during a fall into water. Martinez turned his monitor so Scott could see the autopsy photographs. These marks suggest manual compression. Scott studied the images with his medical training, seeing what Martinez had seen. The bruises formed a clear pattern around Aaron's throat-thumb pressure on one side, for fingers on the other. The kind of marks left by human hands, not random impacts with lake stones. Also, Martinez continued, the amount of water in his lungs was minimal compared to what we typically see in drowning victims. Most people who die by drowning aspirate significant amounts of fluid as they struggle for air. Your brother had very little, meaning he was already unconscious when he entered the water, or already dead. Martinez pulled up additional photos showing Aaron's lungs during examination. The tissue damage patterns suggested he stopped breathing before significant water inhalation occurred. Scott felt pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place in his mind. What about time of death? That's another anomaly that troubled me. Martinez checked his notes. Based on body temperature, lividity patterns, and decomposition factors, your brother had been dead approximately 4 to 6 hours when paramedics arrived at the scene. But according to the incident report, the 911 call came in at 6:15 p.m., so Aaron died sometime between noon and 2 p.m. That's my professional estimate, yes. Scott thought about the timeline. Veronica claimed she'd been shopping in town during the afternoon, then returned home around 5 o'clock to find Aaron missing. She said she searched for him for over an hour before finding his body in the lake and calling for help. But if Martinez was right, Aaron had been dead hours before Veronica made that call. Scott felt pieces clicking together. Did you share these concerns with anyone? Martinez hesitated. I discussed them with Detective Patterson. He said the bruising could have happened during rescue attempts. Case was closed as accidental death. Patterson. Scott knew the name. Lazy detective, 2 years from retirement. The kind who avoided complicated cases. Can I get copies of these photos? For what purpose? Peace of mind. I'm a medical professional. I want to understand what happened. Martinez printed the relevant pages. Scott, if you suspect something, you should talk to police. I will. Thank you for being thorough. Outside, Holly waited patiently with her coloring book. She'd drawn a picture of a house by a lake. In crayon, it looked peaceful. In reality, it had been a crime scene. That evening, Scott called Bryce Renner. His former Marine Squad leader now ran a private security firm in Portland. If anyone could help dig up information on Veronica, it was Bryce. Scott, been too long. How are you holding up? Not great. I need your help with something sensitive. Name it. Scott explained the situation. Holly's story, the suspicious autopsy, the insurance policy. Bryce listened without interruption. You want me to run background on your sister-in-law? Deep background. Financial records, phone logs, travel history. Anything that shows her activities before Aaron died. That's going to take some digging. Give me 48 hours. While they waited, Scott kept Holly close. They visited the library, went to parks, ate at small restaurants. Normal activities that felt completely abnormal under the circumstances. Veronica called twice. Both times, Scott answered with careful normalcy. "How's my baby girl?" "She's good. We went to the zoo today." "That's nice. I should be home Saturday evening." "Take your time. We're having fun." But Veronica's voice carried tension. She was worried about something. Thursday morning, Bryce called back. "Found some interesting connections. Can you meet me in Portland? I'm staying mobile right now. Can you drive out here?" 2 hours later, Bryce arrived at their new motel. He looked the same: broad shoulders, careful eyes, graying beard. The kind of man who'd kept them alive in Afghanistan. Holly was napping, so Scott and Bryce talked quietly on the motel balcony. "Your sister-in-law has been busy," Bryce said, opening a tablet. "Financial records show large cash deposits over the past 6 months. No clear source." "How large?" "20,000 in March, 15 in April, another 20 in May." Aaron didn't know about extra income. "Doesn't look like it." The deposits went to a separate account. Bank records show regular withdrawals in amounts just under 10,000, staying below federal reporting thresholds. Scott studied the data. Money laundering or payments for services? Here's where it gets interesting. Bryce swiped to phone records. Veronica's been in frequent contact with a number registered to Neil Ramos. Turns out Neil Ramos is an alias. For who? Colton Wilder, previously convicted of real estate fraud in California. Did 18 months, got out 2 years ago. Now he's working construction jobs in Oregon under the fake name. Construction work pays $20,000 a month. Not legally. Bryce showed Scott a surveillance photo. "I followed the number to a job site in Bend. This is your sister-in-law's boyfriend." The photo showed a tall man with dark hair loading tools into a truck. Veronica stood beside him, her hand on his arm. "When was this taken?" Bryce checked his notes. 12 days before your brother died." Scott felt cold anger building in his chest. While Aaron worked late nights to support his family, Veronica was planning his murder with her criminal boyfriend. "There's more," Bryce continued. "Hotel records in Bend show Veronica and Colton checked in together multiple times over the past 4 months. Always use cash. Can you trace Colton's background further?" "Already did. 2 arrests for assault. 1 conviction for insurance fraud. He staged a slip-and-fall accident at a grocery store. This guy's career criminal." Scott looked through the motel window at Holly, still sleeping peacefully. She had no idea how much danger she was in. "Bryce, I need surveillance equipment. Cameras, recording devices, GPS trackers." "What are you planning?" "Veronica's going to make a move when she gets back. She needs custody of Holly to file the insurance claim. I want to catch her in the act." Bryce nodded slowly. "I can get you the gear. But Scott, if you're right about this, these people have already killed once." "I know. That's why I'm going to be ready." Friday evening, Scott received what he'd been waiting for: a text for Veronica. "Flight delayed. Won't be home until Sunday. So sorry." The delay gave him time to prepare. Bryce had delivered a box of surveillance equipment that afternoon. Tiny cameras, wireless microphones, GPS trackers, digital recorders. Everything Scott needed to build an airtight case. But first, he needed to force Veronica's hand. Scott drove to a copy shop in the next town and used their computer to create a fake letterhead for Patterson and Associates, estate attorneys. Then he drafted a legal notice. Estate of Aaron Michael Kincaid. Notice of this office has been retained to contest the financial arrangements of the above estate. Evidence suggests potential irregularities in insurance documentation and beneficiary designations. All insurance claims are hereby placed under legal review pending investigation. Please contact this office immediately to schedule a deposition. Sincerely, Robert Patterson, ESQ. Scott printed the letter on expensive paper and mailed it to Veronica's address from 3 different post offices. She would receive it Monday morning. Saturday, he installed surveillance equipment in his house. Cameras in the living room and kitchen, microphones in all the main areas, GPS tracker under his truck. Everything wireless. Everything recording to a cloud server that Bryce controlled. Sunday evening, Scott and Holly returned to his house. They cooked dinner together: spaghetti with meat sauce, Holly's favorite. She seemed more relaxed now, but still jumped at unexpected sounds. Uncle Scott? Will Mom try to hurt me? The question hit him like a physical blow. He knelt down and took her small hands in his. I won't let anyone hurt you. That's a promise. What if she tries? Then she'll have to go through me first. Holly nodded solemnly. At 6 years old, she understood more about danger than most adults. At 9 p.m., Veronica's SUV pulled into the driveway. Veronica knocked on the front door with sharp, impatient raps. Scott opened it slowly, keeping his body between her and Holly. Where's my daughter? Living room. Watching TV. Veronica pushed past him. She looked different, thinner, more angular. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. Holly, Mommy's home. Holly looked up from the couch, but didn't move toward her mother. Hi, Mom. Come give me a hug. I missed you so much. Holly glanced at Scott, then reluctantly walked over for a brief embrace. Veronica held on too long, like she was claiming ownership. Did you have fun with Uncle Scott? Yes. Good. Go pack your things. We're going home. Actually, Scott said, we need to talk first. Veronica's eyes sharpened. About what? Holly, can you go to your room for a few minutes? Adults need to discuss some things. Holly nodded and headed upstairs. Scott waited until he heard her door close. I've contacted Aaron's insurance company. He said calmly that Veronica's face went blank. What for? To let them know I'll be contesting any policy filing. There are questions about how Aaron really died. He drowned. You know that. Did he? Scott moved closer, watching her reactions. Because I've been thinking about the timeline. You called 911 at 6 p.m., but the coroner says Aaron died around 2. Veronica's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Aaron was dead for 4 hours before you called for help. That's not an accident. That's premeditation. You're upset about losing your brother. I understand. But making up conspiracy theories won't bring him back. Scott pulled out his phone and started recording. Then explained the insurance policy. What policy? The $2 million life insurance policy Aaron was supposed to sign. The one that would make you and Holly very wealthy. Veronica's composure cracked slightly. Aaron mentioned insurance. So what? He never signed it. But you needed that money, didn't you? You and your boyfriend, Colton. Now Veronica went completely still. I don't know anyone named Colton. Neil Ramos, then. The construction worker you've been meeting in hotel rooms while your husband worked nights. You've been spying on me. Scott smiled without warmth. I've been investigating my brother's murder. Veronica backed toward the door, but Scott stepped sideways, blocking her path. Here's what's going to happen, he continued. You're going to confess to killing Aaron. You're going to explain how you planned it with Colton. And you're going to do it while this phone records every word. You're insane. I'm taking my daughter and leaving. No, you're not. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Veronica's mask slipped completely, and Scott saw the cold calculation underneath. It won't matter what you think you know, she said quietly. I'll have everything soon anyway. Scott's phone captured every word. Veronica pushed past him toward the stairs. Holly, get down here now. But Holly didn't answer. Scott had sent her out the back door when Veronica first arrived, with instructions to wait at Darla's house. Where is she? Veronica's voice rose to a shout. Safe. Away from you. Veronica spun around, her face twisted with rage. She's my daughter. You can't keep her from me. I can't until the police arrest you for murder. Veronica pulled out her phone and dialed frantically. Colton? We have a problem. Scott knows something. He has her. I need to deal with him first. She hung up and smiled at Scott. You think you're so smart, but you just signed your own death warrant. Scott pretended to be shaken by Veronica's threat. In reality, everything was going exactly as planned. Look, maybe we can work something out, he said, putting fear in his voice. I don't want trouble. Too late for that. What if I sign custody over to you? Just take Holly and leave. I want to ask questions. Veronica studied his face. You do that. Aaron's dead. Nothing will bring him back. Maybe it's better if Holly grows up with her mother. It was a lie that tasted like poison, but Veronica wanted to believe it. Where would we meet? She asked. Scott thought carefully. The old lake house, where Aaron died. Seems appropriate. When? Tonight. Midnight. Bring whatever papers you need for custody transfer. Veronica nodded slowly. And Holly, I'll have her there. After Veronica left, Scott called Detective Farrell. He looked up her record, clean arrests, solid convictions, no corruption scandals. Detective Farrell? This is Scott Kincaid. I need to report a murder. Who's been killed? My brother Aaron, 3 months ago. It was ruled accidental drowning, but I have evidence it was premeditated homicide. Can you come to the station? Actually, I'm setting up a controlled confrontation tonight. The perpetrator will be confessing on tape. I need backup. Mr. Kincaid, we can't. Detective, if you don't help me tonight, a 6-year-old child is going to disappear forever. The killer has already threatened my life. This is happening whether you're there or not. Farrell was quiet for a moment. Where and when? Scott gave her the details. Park across the road. I'll be wearing a wireless microphone. Everything will be recorded. If this goes wrong, it won't. These people are greedy, not smart. At 11:30 p.m., Scott drove toward the lake house where his brother had died. The narrow access road wound through dense pine forest, gravel crunching under his tires. No streetlights, no houses, no witnesses. Aaron had chosen this location specifically for its privacy when he wanted to fish without interruption. Tonight, that isolation made it perfect for a different kind of confrontation. Scott parked 50 yards from the cabin and checked his equipment one final time. Wireless microphone clipped inside his shirt, battery fully charged, and transmitting clearly to Bryce's monitoring station 3 miles away. Backup digital recorder in his jacket pocket in case the primary system failed. GPS beacon sewn into his belt so Detective Farrell could track his exact location even if everything else went wrong. The lake house sat dark among the towering trees, exactly as Aaron had left it 3 months ago. Scott had avoided coming here since the funeral, unable to face the memories of childhood summers and adult fishing trips that were now permanently stained with the knowledge of murder point. 2 sets of headlights appeared on the access road, moving slowly over the rough terrain. Veronica's black SUV led the way, followed by a dented pickup truck that belonged to Colton. They parked near the cabin and stepped out, their voices carrying clearly in the still night air. You sure he came alone? Colton's voice was deeper than Scott had expected, with a slight rasp that suggested years of smoking. He said he did, but Scott's not stupid. Veronica's response carried the tension of someone trying to maintain control while everything fell apart around her. We need to be careful. Careful's what got us into this mess. Should have handled the brother-in-law months ago. There wasn't time. Aaron's death had to look accidental, and then Scott started asking questions too fast. Scott stepped out of the shadows near the cabin's front porch, his hands visible and empty. Both criminals turned toward him, Colton's hand moving instinctively towards something under his jacket. You came alone like you promised? Veronica asked, her eyes scanning the darkness behind Scott for signs of backup. Just me. Holly's safe with friends. Scott kept his voice calm and steady. Where are the custody papers? Right here. Veronica held up a manila folder. But first we need to discuss terms that go beyond what we talked about on the phone. Scott had expected this. Criminals like Veronica never honored simple agreements when they could complicate things to their advantage. What additional terms? Colton moved to Scott's left, trying to flank him while staying in the shadows. Professional positioning that confirmed his experience with violence. The terms are simple, Veronica said, stepping closer to the cabin's porch light so Scott could see her face clearly. You sign over custody, forget everything you think you know about Aaron's death, and disappear from our lives permanently. That was already the deal. No, the original deal assumed you were just a grieving brother who wanted to avoid family drama. Now we know you're actively investigating Aaron's death and talking to medical examiners. Veronica's mask of fake concern had completely fallen away, revealing the cold calculation underneath. That changes everything. Scott felt the wireless microphone pick up every word as Veronica continued. You see, Scott, you have the same problem Aaron had. You're too honest for your own good, too moral, too unwilling to look the other way when convenient lies would make everyone's life easier. What's that supposed to mean? It means Aaron would still be alive if he just signed the insurance papers and stopped asking questions about where I spent my afternoons. Veronica's voice grew harder with each word. But he couldn't do that. He had to investigate and pry and make everything complicated. The confession was exactly what Scott needed, but Veronica wasn't finished. So we had to solve the Aaron problem permanently. And now we have to solve the Scott problem the same way. Colton pulled a knife from his jacket, a fixed-blade hunting knife with a 6-inch serrated edge designed for gutting large fish. In the moonlight, the steel looked black with menace. Aaron would have signed the insurance policy if he'd been smart, Veronica continued. But he asked too many questions. Wanted to know why I suddenly cared about life insurance. Scott's microphone captured every word. So you killed him for money. I killed him because he was in the way. Veronica's voice rose with sudden fury. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who thinks they're better than you? Who judges every decision you make? Better than being married to a murderer. Colton stepped closer, but Scott held his ground. Aaron trusted you, Scott said. Aaron was weak, just like you. Veronica's eyes glittered in the moonlight. But don't worry, Holly won't remember either of you after a few years. You won't touch that child. I'll do whatever I want with my daughter. Maybe Colton and I will take her traveling. Kids disappear all the time. Scott felt rage building in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. So you're going to kill me and kidnap Holly. We're going to stage another accident. Grief-stricken uncle takes his own life at the scene of his brother's death. Very tragic. Colton moved closer with the knife. Should have minded your own business. Just like Aaron should have signed the papers, Veronica added. If you hadn't hesitated, Aaron would have signed it, and we'd be done with all this. Now we have to clean up again. The confession was complete. Time for the cavalry. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as Detective Farrell and 2 uniformed officers emerged from the tree line. Police! Drop the weapon! Colton spun toward the officers, still holding the knife. Run! But Veronica stood frozen, realizing she'd been trapped. Colton lunged at Scott with the blade. Scott sidestepped and grabbed Colton's wrist, using leverage to slam him to the ground. The knife skittered away across the dirt. One of the officers hit Colton with a taser when he tried to get up. He convulsed and went still. Veronica tried to run, but only made it 20 feet before Farrell tackled her. Let me go. You can't prove anything. Farrell pulled out a digital recorder. Veronica Kincaid, you're under arrest for the murder of Aaron Kincaid and conspiracy to commit murder. As she read the Miranda rights, Veronica's voice played back clearly. If you hadn't hesitated, Aaron would have signed it, and we'd be done with all this. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Colton took a plea deal and testified against Veronica in exchange for life in prison instead of the death penalty. His testimony filled in the details Scott had suspected. Veronica met Colton at a casino in April. They started an affair, then began planning Aaron's murder when she learned about the potential insurance payout. The plan was simple. Get Aaron to sign the policy, wait a few months, then stage an accident. But Aaron grew suspicious and refused to sign. So they moved to Plan B, kill him first, then forge his signature later. Veronica needed legal custody of Holly to file the claim as the child's guardian. With both Aaron and Scott dead, she would have been Holly's only living relative. The recording from the lake house played for the jury multiple times. Veronica's voice, clear and cold. I killed him because he was in the way. The defense tried to claim emotional distress, but the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. Hotel receipts, phone records, financial transactions, everything painted a picture of calculated murder. Veronica was convicted on all counts: first-degree murder, fraud conspiracy, child endangerment, and attempted murder. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. After the trial, Scott legally adopted Holly. He sold his house in Crestfield and moved to a smaller town in the Coast Range. Cleaner air, fewer people, no memories of Aaron's death. He found work with a medical consulting firm, reviewing cases remotely. It paid well and let him homeschool Holly part-time. Detective Farrell visited once to check on them. She found Scott on his front porch, watching Holly play with a neighbor's dog. Any regrets? She asked. About what? Not trying to forgive her. Some people would say holding on to anger isn't healthy. Scott watched Holly laugh as the dog licked her face. The sound was the best thing in his world. Forgiveness is for people who stop lying. he said quietly. Farrell nodded and left them in peace. 6 months later, Scott had built a good life for Holly. She attended a small school with children who didn't know her story. She drew pictures of flowers instead of lakes. She smiled more often. Bryce visited from Portland, bringing stories about his paranoid survival group and their latest theories about government surveillance. Darla sent cookies and letters from Crestfield, updating them on neighborhood gossip. But the best part was watching Holly grow up safe, protected from the people who would have destroyed her life for money. Scott never spoke Veronica's name again. Some people didn't deserve remembrance. On quiet evenings, he sat on his porch and watched Holly play in the yard. The anger in his chest had cooled to something harder and more permanent, a commitment to truth over comfort, justice over forgiveness. Aaron was gone, but Holly was alive and safe. That was enough.